original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, here we go. Look at that. It is the 14th day of November. Time for Now and Next. Story Studio Network. We got a little bit of backlog. I mean, there's too much to talk about this week. So we are going to do two episodes of Now and Next this week. Yeah, I know. Not a hand. But here's what we're going to do. There's much to talk about based on the report that was released this week by our friends at Daily Bread Food Bank. And the Daily Bread report is annual. It is the Who is Hungry report. And it's just one of those things that unfortunately just kind of takes over the agenda every autumn and then gets ignored. But it's a staggering number. 3.5 million visits to the food bank in 1 year in Toronto, up 273%. So, what the hell are we going to do about that? Neil Hetherington is going to join us in the first episode of this week on Now and Next. And then in the second episode, we're going to talk to Scott Clancy. He is the retired Major General of the RCAF. And he has spent more than his share of time paying attention to the world security. He was the former director of operations as he wrapped up his career at NORAD. And he is going to tell you that a Donald Trump presidency puts NORAD at risk. That is our defense agreement between Canada and the United States. He is going to tell you with certainty that the Trump presidency puts NORAD at risk. You're just going to have to watch and listen, folks. Watch and listen. Because that's the scary part about it. But there's also something important I got to tell you. Many of you will know that I do music off the side of my desk. Behind me here, that's my poster for the show I did about Martin Luther King. If you're just listening to this on Apple or Spotify, the show was called Call to Freedom. And I based it on the writings, the sermons, the speeches, the essays of Martin Luther King. But I've also got one called The Promise. And it is a 60-minute Christmas show that I wrote when I was running a youth choir at St. Bonaventure Church in Toronto. And so we're going to stage The Promise in December, and you can buy tickets, and we'd love for you to do it because the reason that we're doing it is to support St. Clair Inn. And St. Clair Inn is transitional housing for homeless women who have mental health challenges. And that, it's getting them off the street, out of shelters, and standing them up again so that they can kind of get their lives back in order. So I'll put the link in the show notes for The Promise, but there is a QR code rather there on the poster you can see, and I'll put the events URL in there so you can buy the tickets. They're only $30. We're trying to raise $15,000 so that we can make room at the inn this year at St. Clair Inn. All right, without further ado, let's get to Now and Next, and we'll begin with the Who's Hungry report from the Daily Bread Food Bank. Some startling numbers this year, and I don't know why we're surprised, but every year at this time, Daily Bread Food Bank sort of presents its annual findings of who's hungry, and it's a rhetorical question because we know there are lots of folks who are hungry. But this year, the numbers are staggering. 3.5 million food bank visits recorded this year in Toronto alone. That's just the 416. And we'll get into some of the details and some of the numbers, but for those of you who have followed along at Story Studio Network, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the 2030 project. It is has nothing to do with Donald Trump, by the way. This is all about eliminating poverty, and that the cost of poverty is extraordinary. We're going to talk a lot about, budgets at all levels of government and how we're going to try and stretch our dollars. And we can't afford to do this and we can't afford to do that. We can't afford poverty in Ontario. We can't afford poverty in Canada, right across the country. Yet we seem to be willing to do so. And the latest numbers suggest a willful ignorance at all levels of government, that we have 3.5 million visits to food banks in the city of Toronto. Neil Hetherington is here. He is the CEO at Daily Bread Food Bank, just in from walking the dog. A little chilly out there this morning.
It was chilly, but Charlie loves it. He's a yellow lab who just enjoys that fall breeze.
Good call. Well, all of this kind of coming together around the autumn, and your report on Who's Hungry, as I said, suggests it's almost an annual rite of the season. You and I have talked a lot over the last number of years, Neil. I looked at those numbers this week and I thought, holy crap, where did those other million people come from? Well, they're million visits. Let's be clear. But I'm looking at the numbers. It was 2017-ish when, food bank visits actually hit 1 million visits. We've had that many more in less than a year. What's going on?
Yeah, it's 1 million more visits, and it's 155,000 people who have never gone to a food bank before who came for the very first time to one of the Daily Bread or North York Harvest networked agencies across the city of Toronto. So within that 155,000, we have folks who are employed. They In the report, we talk about the fact that about 2/3, 60%, have a post-secondary education and they've got a job. And that adage of you go to school, you work hard, you get a job, you'll be fine. That promise, that social contract is broken. And I think it's time for us to have an honest conversation about what we can do to restore that promise.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you've been having that conversation for some time, I know that you and your team highly active in terms of the call to action for the federal government and the Canada Disability Benefit. I know that you have the ear of the premier of this province. I know that you are a regular in conversation with the folks at City Hall. I like to say I hear them say, "Well, I hear you, Neil, but are they listening?"
Well, it's a good point, and we've talked about it over the past day or so with different people inquiring, where they ask, well, what do the politicians think about this? What do they say? And I say, well, unfortunately, my typical meeting, I'll go in and I'll talk about what's happening in their riding or their ward, and I'll talk about food bank usage and who's coming to the food bank and why they're coming to the food bank. And then I talk to them about what they can do to reduce the numbers of food insecure folks across Canada. 8.6 million food insecure individuals. Basically, out of 40 million, you're 20% of the population. And and so I give them the policy alternatives, and then they gently put their arm around me and they guide me to the door and they say, you're doing a great job, and keep it up. And that's the end of our meeting. And it can't be the end of the meeting. It's got to be the start of not just a conversation, but rather legislative change. It baffles me why somebody in leadership at any level of government and any party doesn't say, I have the opportunity. We as a party have an opportunity to eradicate poverty from the face of Canada. And because we know things that work and things that don't work, we know the things that balance a healthy economy with decent social structures, and why they wouldn't champion that as first point of business. baffles me because to me, that would leave the legacy that any politician would want to leave.
Okay, but where's the gap? Where is the disconnect here? Because between the handshake at the door and the showing you out the door, at some point, something's not sinking in. There doesn't seem to be a sense of. Let me suggest that there's no political return on this. I don't know what it is. What's the
Yeah.
problem?
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. There hadn't been a political return on it until it became a kitchen table conversation. And the thing that worked with the Canada Disability Benefit, we worked very hard alongside and supporting a coalition of disability advocates from across the country. Daily Bread was intertwined with their workings, did everything we could to support. One of the things that we did to support was ensure that our Minister of Finance, Christian Freeland, had about 200,000 emails from different folks across the country that said it is an abomination that there are 1 to 1.5 million Canadians who are legislated to live in deep poverty because they cannot work and they are on disability. And so there was an impetus there. I mean, I think she felt at the time the concerns just in the riding next door to her of an ousted liberal, and realized that there has to be action taken. And so that's that bridge. It's making it so that it's politically unpalatable to carry on the way that we are carrying on in this country.
I want to bring up some of the numbers from your report, and I think one of the ones that sort of really strikes me is that that 1 in 5 clients at the food bank are spending every single dime they have on housing, and they've got nothing left for food at the end of the month. That's 20% of those, whatever, 3.5 million visits, presumably.
It's it's staggering that they have to rely on friends, family, and charity, and many of them would be chronic users of the food bank, and by chronic, somebody who is attending the food bank more than 6 months in a row. And of that group, many of them are on disability, where they're forced to. They're in a chronic condition. Those are the types of individuals that we know we have an opportunity through policy to be able to assist. I have the belief that the food bank, or not the belief, come to the acceptance that the food bank will always be there. There's always been food banks, not just the last 40 years, but soup kitchens prior, and meals provided at a boudoir. There's always been food charity worldwide. That should, however, be infrequent and rare and short-lived. And yet we see more and more chronic usage. And those are the areas where I think we want to tackle from a policy perspective. So making sure that people have decent, affordable housing, that solves food banks when you have decent, affordable housing. And then the second, when there's decent income supports, making sure that people on disability get the income that they need. So those are opportunities ahead.
But and I get that, and I understand that they'll always be there. But given the current state and the pressures on food bank, this is not sustainable, is it?
It's not. We've gone from spending $1.5 million a year on food. This was pre-pandemic, and today, 4 years later, we are spending $29 million a year on food. So that means that our fundraising team, and they're wonderful, but it's not sustainable. They're wonderful. They've been able to increase donations from about 8.5 million a year to just under 40 million a year. But we're still spending more than that. We'll be spending about 50 million this year, and drawing down on the pandemic reserve. And that reserve expires, or will be depleted within about 16 to 18 months. So in that time frame, sometime in 2025, towards the end, we will start to decrease the amount of food that somebody gets on a weekly basis. It will go from 3 days worth of food to 2.7, 2.5 days worth of food. And that is taking food out of the mouths of children. 25% of the folks that were coming to food banks this past year, out of that 3.5 million, were kids. And so that is a painful reality of the lack of sustainability that there is. And so there does need to be a government intervention, not an intervention to support the food banks. Let me be very, very clear, because I think there's a lot of people who think that food banks get money from governments. We don't accept money from governments. We do that for two reasons. One is so I can have an honest conversation with politicians. And two, we
Mhm.
don't want them to think that this is a parallel social safety net. It's not. This is community beautifully coming together to support neighbors. But it should never be construed as a replacement for an adequate social structure.
Talk to me about the hidden costs, because I heard the high level numbers and all of the media coverage that you've had over the last couple of days. But the whole mental health issue here is
Mm.
really coming to the fore.
Yeah, you're seeing startling increases in uh, stress, mental health challenges, anxiety, depression, as you would expect. You can't feed your child. There's a heightened sense of concern, obviously, and anxiety, and we are seeing that in a significant way. People are having to miss meals. That is becoming more evident. So it's not just the numbers, like the scope of who's being served, the 155,000 new people, 3.49 million client visits. So there's a lot of people coming, but the depth of their hunger is increasing. We saw almost a doubling over the last 3 years of people who have missed meals in order to pay for rent or pay for another necessity. So that's coming, and we're very concerned. One of the things that I love and appreciate that you do is not just on this podcast, but on the Ledge. You talk about the fact that poverty is a very, very expensive thing to keep going. If you're a legislature, uh, it costs some $30 billion just in Ontario per year, between the judicial system, between the healthcare system, and now we are adding on individuals already in a vulnerable state, increasing their sense of mental health or challenges, and it is going to cost taxpayers even more. So let's go upstream and let's solve it at the root causes.
Part of that has been, and you and I talked about this, I guess, about a year or so ago, mostly when we started to talk about the international students, that in fact, government was importing poverty based on the way that was set
Mhm.
up. There has been a course correction there. Um, and I know that a significant number of new users are new Canadians or are new to Canada. I don't want to get into I don't want those people in our neighborhood conversation, because that's not the intention. Is that a step in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it's important that we talk about it. There are folks nervous about talking about it because it may create a xenophobic thought here. But let's be honest with the individuals who are making decisions or forced to find a new home in Canada. To say there are 803,000 international students. Now, Canada is building 200,000 houses per year. There are about 400,000 refugee claimants and about 400,000 who go through a process, the immigration process. And it doesn't take much math to figure out that we've got a challenge there when it comes to housing, particularly housing uh, at an affordable rate. And so we need to build more housing, but we're not going to be able to build our way out of that. So let's not put individuals in such difficult circumstances. Minister Miller made good changes to the international student program by doubling the amount that they had to have prior to arrival to pay for living expenses. It went from $10,000 or so dollars per year to $20,000, and you saw all of the colleges complain about it because international enrollment plummeted. Um, I would argue that that is a good thing for both the international student and for how we are able to welcome and ensure that there is decent housing and that our healthcare system can expand at the rates that it needs to expand, because immigration is a bedrock foundation of our country. It is what brings jobs, creativity, innovation, and we need immigration in order to fulfill so many of the positions that go vacant for so long. So I think it's just a matter of having honest conversations about it, making sure that it's strategic, and making sure that it is balanced within our capacity to grow as a nation.
The interesting thing for me though is, and I'm following that narrative. I understand where you're going from here to here to here to here and how it all makes sense. But I'll hear somebody say, I go and I see the lineup at the food bank, and it's a bunch of young kids there, and they're all university students, and they shouldn't be in that lineup. And there's again, there isn't just a political disconnect. There is a cultural, on the ground, observational disconnect with the effects of that international student program and the need for food banks.
The Vancouver Food Bank made the decision, and it goes against policy of Food Banks Canada and an association that we're part of. And they said, first year students, beginning this September, if you're a first year international student, we can't provide you service at the food bank. Because we know that you have the income to be able to support it. We know you have the $20,000 sitting in your bank account with a GIC that decants over the course of the year, and therefore we feel comfortable not providing service to you. I don't agree with that decision, because you don't know the life circumstance that student has gone through. Perhaps their rent is $2,000 a month, and they decant that, and they're gone 2 months early. Maybe they had a death in the family. Maybe they weren't able to get that supplementary income. There's a whole host of reasons why that person might be in that line. I want to make sure international students don't have the benefit of making use of any government social programs. And I do think that it's important that the government have conversations with the charitable sector, food banks, housing providers, to make sure, because we've been picking up the pieces, that it is not a off balance sheet download of a social priority through a incoherent and lackluster strategy when it comes to immigration.
As you described the Vancouver scenario, am I wrong to say it's the only means test that is actually applied to food bank use?
It's the only one that I'm aware of, and so it'll be interesting. They've just come out with this decision. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm not sure that as I said, I don't agree with that philosophy or that, but I understand where it's coming from. And
Sure, sure.
I get why the Vancouver Food Bank has made that decision. I have empathy for that decision, and I would suggest that our fight is best fought at Parliament Hill, at Queens Park, and at City Hall, rather than with that international student.
Yeah, the problem is that you're fighting one fight on three fronts, and again, let's go back to the welcome in, good job, pat you on the head, off you go. It's easy then to deflect to another level of government. I ask you this all the time: what do we need to do? I mean, no offense, but you and I have to stop talking about this.
I would. I want to keep talking with you over a California sandwich, and we're talking about your music, and we're talking
We're
about
on.
something completely different. Um,
Yes,
the uh, you know, I think that there's yesterday when we released the report, there was a sense of anger that I've never experienced before in the speakers who went to the podium. And so we had somebody from the Fort York Spadina Community Center, and we had somebody from North York Harvest and Food Banks Canada and Feed Ontario, and they all spoke for a couple of minutes. And I got to tell you, the mood has shifted. It has shifted in terms of, politicians don't come to the food bank for a tour and a photo. That just wastes our time. Come for a tour and a photo and a conversation, but only if you're actually going to do something about it. And there was a sense of spiciness when it came to the conversations that were there. Um, I think we probably do need to get a little bit more spicy. I think that we do need to raise our concerns and call it out the way that it is, what we're seeing on the ground. This report's very clear. The calls for action are clear. And I think that it's probably high time that we have a good conversation with the volunteers, the staff, and our board of directors to say, what do we do to actually demonstrate to government that they have to act now? Is it that food bank strike? Is it the reduction in service? Is it protests? Like, what do we do to make a difference? I've always taken the path of working alongside whatever party's in power to help them look good by doing the right thing. And I think that panned out with the Canada Disability Benefit. There's much to go on that front. We're not 100% there. But within short order, there was the opportunity to be able to get $6 billion over the course of 4 years. So those are heavy conversations. You and I have had some of them of what we should do. And I do think that a little more spice at the food bank is in order.
Pitchfork, your version of pitchforks and torches. I mean,
hot food,
whatever gets their attention, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Neil Hetherington, thanks for all the good work you do, and it's always good to talk. We'll have to get together over a California sandwich soon.
I would like that. Thanks, David.
Very good. All right, Neil Hetherington and the folks at Daily Bread. You can check out the Who's Hungry report at dailybread.ca. And as Neil says, it's time to get, in his words, spicy about it. Get mad. There's no fucking excuse for any of this stuff to carry on the way it is. The numbers speak for themselves. Let me just put that number up. Look at that hockey stick. Holy crap. That's 3.5 million visits to the food bank. And that spike in this graph is in 2024. Here this year, the 2023, and it goes all the way back to 1995. The only time we came close to 1 million visits to begin with was around the time of the recession in 08-09, and then again in 2017. And then since pandemic, of course, boom, off it goes. So the numbers are speaking. They're screaming that something needs to be done. Whoever your MP is, your MPP, your city councilor, your mayor, they're not doing enough. They're just not doing enough. It's nice to turn around and tell Neil he's doing a great job, and he is, and the team is working their asses off at the food bank. But seriously, people, stand up on your hind legs and just say it out loud. That's a good start, right? Let's do that, shall we? All right, and if you've got something to say, we'd like to hear it as well. So you can actually leave us a message here at Now and Next. www.speakpipe.com/now and next. You just hit the microphone button there. Leave us a message, 90 seconds. What's your answer to the food bank crisis and hunger and poverty in this province? We should not have people who go hungry on a daily basis. Never mind our kids. It's just unconscionable that we allow that to happen. So leave us your talkback message at speakpipe.com/now and next. If you missed that, it is in the show notes. There's a link there for you if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, etc. Otherwise, it's on the YouTube as well. We want to hear what you have to say, and we'll definitely include your comments in upcoming shows. Speakpipe.com facebook.com/now and next. All right. That was a spirited conversation. Glad we had it.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and Next is Story Studio Network's flagship podcast, produced by our chief executive producer, Dave Trafford, and supported by our entire SSN team, including our senior producers, Becky Coles and Jen Hudson, our technical producer and audio editor, Mike Trutler. Jamie Nickerson is our production manager, and our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Also, I'm Erin Trafford, Queen of the Universe.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.